request Professor Amiya Pattanayak to give the opening remarks.
My panelists, co-panelists, Dr. Sheila Tripathi, Dr. Bachchan Kumar, and Dr. M. Saif Anwar, who is joining us virtually. I hope he is available virtually. Is he available? Can you project him on time? Okay, that's fine. So we have 3 panelists, including myself, 4. Our time is given 2 hours. We'll try to finish it within time because we have another plenary session thereafter. Extremely distinguished ladies and gentlemen, delegates, co-panelists. At the outset, I thank the organizers for having invited me to this session, to chair this session, first plenary session. As a matter of fact, this is my cup of tea. I am very familiar with this subject. I was happy that I received the invitation. As a matter of fact, in the first session, they say phase 2. In the phase 1, I had suggested in the valedictory session that such a session should be organized and that they have made it. I'm happy about it. I'm sure the deliberations will bring a lot of changes to the history that we are having today. In the inaugural session, we had what we call mini India. Mini India means we had something of everything. We had deliberations on Indian culture, impact of Indian culture, impact of Indian politics, impact of Indian art architecture, and Indian religion in Southeast Asian countries. And so also, we had the other side of the story. What the Southeast Asian people say, scholars say, we have both. We had the look east, look west, what are its relevance, whether we should rely on that. And finally, we are on to the paper reading sessions. We are on to the sessions where we will hear scholars speaking, giving their pinpointed views with authentic documentation so that we can form our opinion. Southeast maritime history of Orissa, these are 2 aspects. One is the contribution of India. Another is role of Kalinga in colonizing or Indianizing the Southeast Asian countries. So there are 2 aspects. India aspect is one, and there is how much role Kalinga has played in it, that we have to study, and probably that is the theme of this session. And we all say, we the scholars of Kalinga say, what India has done, it is mostly due to Kalinga, contributions of Kalinga. So we have established it factually with authentic facts and figures, and we can argue it out with anybody, whether it is Chola, or it is Bengal, or it is anywhere else, it is West, it is Gujarat coast. So we have the capacity to argue it out with anybody that it was Kalinga and Kalinga and Kalinga that was chiefly responsible in, I use the word with caution, colonizing Southeast Asian studies, because the word colonization is bitterly criticized by a group of historians who call us nationalists, because we say we are the best. So now the point comes, if we say we have gone to Southeast Asia, colonized it, imposed our religion, our culture, our language, our art and architecture, our administration, then what was existing there in those countries? Were they passive recipients or the active participants? So if we call ourselves or our friends call us as nationalists. Some of the scholars of Southeast Asian countries also call them their scholars as nationalists. They claim it is we who have done it. This 760 Borobudur sheep in Ajanta depicting Buddhist monks. They claim these Buddhist monks are not Indian Buddhists. This is Indonesian Buddhists. The sheep was prepared by Indonesia, not by, it was not carrying Indian monks. Buddhist monks are there, sheep is there, but the monks, the Buddhist monks were Indonesian monks. The sheep was constructed in Indonesia. If Juktikalpataru, according to them, if Juktikalpataru is the Bible of shipbuilding, we had also developed shipbuilding in Indonesia. In this connection, before in my opening speech, I will quote only two, without being very specific about historiography and colonization. I'll give in my concluding remarks after hearing the panelists. I only read out three scholars who have spoken in this connection. In case of Sri Lanka, we know K.M. De Silva is one of the renowned historians and one of the pioneers in writing the social, cultural, and political history of Ceylon. His work begins with the statement. His book begins, the first paragraph of the book is like this, I'll read it out. In the Mahavamsa, the irrevocable source of reconstruction of the early history of the island, the story of men in Sri Lanka begins with the arrival there sometime in the 5th century BC of Vijaya. So he begins with this sentence that history of Sri Lanka begins with the arrival of Vijaya. And he goes on saying the first chapter throughout what Vijaya was, how he ruled, how he invited his brother declined. So all these things he has mentioned, which we believe in Kalinga, that Vijaya was from Kalinga. So if Vijaya was from Kalinga, then there is no doubt that we say this, and I am quoting Professor De Silva in this connection. This is about Sri Lanka. Then I go to Indonesia. Another scholar I am calling is, Indonesian scholars must have known him, is Professor A.B. Lapian. He writes, he gives the other side of the story. He writes, he is an expert on maritime history. He writes, the island of Bali to Indonesians and indeed many bear the living evidence of ancient relations, example of the way the local people have successfully blended alien cultural elements with their own autonomous customs to produce a unique culture that has become the marvel of many visitors to the island. According to him, most studies have been dealt with problems of Indianization and Hinduization, whereas other matters have escaped the attention of the scholars, at least till recent times. Indonesia being a country of islands, island groups, he says, you claim, according to him, that we claim that since we have a long coastline, the people of Kalinga were good seafarers. He says Indonesian, all the countries are islands. The only medium of transport from one island to another was water. So from the very beginning, we were conversant with water transport. What Indians taught us. There was no aeroplane then. So only means of transport from one island to another island was water. So we have invented water. He says that the Borobudur ship is an Indonesian ship. So that is how he says. So this is one. And another scholar I will quote. This second scholar from same Indonesia I am giving because he has spoken on language. We have a lot of discussion in the inaugural session about language. I also feel that language was also an important factor of interaction. As all of you know, Odia has become now a classical language, and in establishing Odia as a classical language, we tried to, I was a part of it, we tried to trace its origin, how far back we can go. And in that case, we came in across Odia language being used in other countries outside India. So that is how we established this authenticity. He says, he supports me, he supports that Odia has impacted the language of Java. He says that. According to IGP Phalangundi, another Indonesian scholar, the language of Indonesia, which is also now the national language of Malaysia and Singapore, is the Bhasa. And Bhasa, as you know, is a Sanskrit word. This is primarily based on Sanskrit word, but is not indebted most to Arabic, Persian, or even European languages. So you find Muslims and Christians having Hindu names in Indonesia, but there are different dialects and scripts for different provinces, especially for Bali and Java. Javanese sounds much like Odia, ending with O, but not the Balinese. So he says this language similarity that we have used in establishing our linkage. I was telling some of my scholars, some of my eminent scholars who are working in the field, Dr. Banudhar Patra, Dr. Sunil Pattanayak, here I have told them both that you work on language, impact of language in our relationship. This is how it is. We get it from an Indonesian source. Now, I leave it to them to carry on the work. So with these opening remarks, I'm sure Professor Dr. Sheila Tripathi and other scholar, they will give papers. The rest of my talk, I will give it in the concluding remarks. Thank you.